representatives of the owners of 102 McBride Street that an excavation of the medium strip bordering the street at the front of the property will be undertaken to connect sewer lines to provide to the proposed subdivision, an area that was never remediated in the initial toxic clean-up. Has the council or the EPA ever tested the soil on this median strip? Last question. In documentation provided by council to objectors in respect of the development of 102 McBride Street, a third Edge Group report titled Limited Phase 1 and Limited Phase 2 Environmental Site Assessment, December 2015, concerned with soil management, was never provided for public scrutiny with other sections of the development application. Did the council have this report at the time of my initial meeting with the members of the planning department? And if so, why has this section of the application never been made available to public view?
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
hand over to the Director of Planning and Economic Development.
Through the Mayor, Mr Snowden, thank you for your question. They're very detailed, so I'm unable to answer some of that. I have got it, thank you. What I can say is that there will be a detailed planning report going to the Urban Planning Committee on the 23rd of August, which will be providing a response to the 3 questions that you have asked. So that will be coming shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we've got a question from Shane McDermott.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and councillors. First of all, thanks to this council who helped us to get our bus back. When our bus came back after a couple of years, due to a change in the state government, it was nothing like our previous friendly community bus. It had been set up to fail, and failing it is. The reasons are the bus only goes between 9:05am and 2:20pm, missing most commuters' working times. The service operates on a 1-hour frequency. The driver layover occurs at Shields Reserve. As the journey takes 18 minutes, there is no reason why the bus could not operate on a 30-minute frequency, going round and round. We should run the bus between Monday, Friday, 7:30am to 7:30pm, and Saturday, slightly less hours. Move the layover to Berkeley Square, where there is a designated bus bay. There are also toilets and refreshments available to the drivers.
Shane, sorry to interrupt. Is there a question that's...
Yes.
Yep, could you just say the question and then perhaps continue on with the context?
This is the question, it's
Okay.
the finish. As a group, we acknowledge the council's support of the service in the past. We are organising a community meeting about the service as follows. 11am Sunday, 20th of August 2017. Shields Reserve, corner of Hope Street, Duggan Street, Brunswick West. Council's assistance with the following would be greatly appreciated. Councillors attending the meeting. Financial assistance with the distribution of flyers publicising the meeting. Writing to the Public Transport Minister, Jacinta Allen, seeking improvements to Route 509. I'd also like to add that the group a couple of years ago had a $5,000 grant, of which we didn't use 1 cent. I'm hoping that is still in the system and that we can use it to finance the assistance with the flyers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shane. Now, is there a councillor who wishes to respond? Or Councillor Bolton?
I'll just respond. Shane contacted me today about this issue. So I've put an urgent business item up. It's up to councillors whether councillors let me put that urgent business item. But certainly in the past, council has, since before I was on council, supported the campaign, firstly to stop the distraction of Hope Street bus, and then in the last council to try and bring the bus back. And unfortunately, it's a real shame that it's been brought back in a way that's designed to limit the number of people who can use it. So it'll be up to councillors as to whether or not I'm allowed to move that urgent business item.
Thank you. Yeah. See you?
So just through the Mayor, I'll just add something really quickly. So I think we're only just understanding this issue today. So it would really benefit from some further discussion with you about what form that assistance could take. So for example, whether using our social media platforms to distribute the material could be a good result rather than necessarily sending officers out to distribute. There'll be maybe some other ways we can assist. So my suggestion is rather than maybe concluding exactly how it is tonight, perhaps there's a follow-up conversation that might be a bit more fruitful. We have worked very well. We've worked well in the past with you in terms of being able to do this.
So with who would the conversation?
So the conversation would be through our officers and potentially yourself, and the group to discuss further ways of assisting you. So we can take that on notice tonight and commit to actioning a discussion with you and taking it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Quite a bit we can do without needing a resolution. We can do that. So.
Thank you. Okay. The next question is from Sean Pickard.
No,
Pickard. Sorry.
My question is to Grant Thorne, and I do hope that this time he's actually given a chance to answer it rather than somebody answering it for him. It's now been 2 months.
The question will come through me.
Beg your pardon?
The question comes through the Mayor.
Whatever
and-
your formalities are, but I'm still addressing it to Grant Thorne.
Right, well, perhaps a councillor might wish to answer, or I can hand it over to
Well, no,
Grant
because
Thorne.
this is a question for Grant Thorne.
Okay, Grant Thorne is not a councillor.
No,
but I
that's
can hand
right,
it over
but
to him
he-
if the level of detail requires it to be answered. So please proceed with your
Well, I
question.
would rather he answers it rather than somebody answering it for him.
Okay, go ahead with your
Because
question and
he's
then
the
we'll
one who's
assess it
made
from
this
there.
decision.
Go ahead with the question.
2 months ago, Moreland City Council voted on a motion put up by Councillor Abood to open the meeting room toilets at the Coburg Library. Why, after 2 months, have you still not opened those toilets?
Right, so that's the question?
That's the question.
Right, okay. Councillors, is there a councillor who wishes to speak?
I think
Sorry?
No, I would like Grant Thorne to answer it, please.
Okay, I believe there was a subsequent motion. Is that correct, Councillor Abood?
I think that I'd have to take that question on notice as well.
No, but that's for him, not you.
I've already kind of been verbally abused by this man.
Okay, well then, no,
I
I
didn't
won't.
use you, I just
Okay,
called you a
let's,
seller.
sorry.
Yeah, you
I
did.
called you
Councillor
a sellout.
Abood, my apologies for passing that to you. I'll hand over to Grant. Sorry.
Through the Mayor, thank you. Question, Sean. There was I forget the months of the meetings, but there was an original resolution by Council to open those meeting room toilets. At the following meeting, Council changed its resolution and not to open those
I'm
Coburg
not
meeting
aware
room
that they
toilets
did
to the
that,
public.
sorry.
Right.
Yeah, I was there, we did.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh.
Well, I didn't see
Okay.
anything in the minutes about it.
All right, thank you, Sean. So the next question is from Lauren Holland.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Holland and I'm the President of the Moreland Toy Library. As you all know, the Moreland Toy Library has been providing opportunities for children of Moreland to learn through play for the past 26 years. I have 2 questions for you, the councillors. Are you able to provide any certainty to the Moreland Toy Library that the report into our ongoing funding will be tabled at the October Council meeting? My second question is, can the councillors confirm when the new storage shed being built at the Pascoe Vale Community Centre to house our toy collection will be ready for occupation? Now, the background of these questions is as follows. In the April council meeting, our organisation was delighted when this council approved our part-time use of the Pascoe Vale Community Centre, the first step in our journey to opening a much-needed toy library in the Pascoe Vale area. In this council meeting, it was voted by the councillors that a separate report into the ongoing funding for the toy library be prepared and tabled in the June council meeting. This hasn't occurred. Since the April council meeting, the Moreland Toy Library Committee has been working closely with council staff to enable this report to be written. Earlier this month, we have been advised the tabling of this report has been delayed until the October meeting. We are unable to plan for the opening of the new Pascoe Vale branch of our toy library with any certainty until we know if the council will be providing any ongoing funding to our organisation. We are not able to finalise our budget to work out how many days a week we will be able to open our libraries and how much of our savings we will need to put aside to cover our financial shortfalls during the first few years of operating the second branch that could otherwise be used to cover some of our setup costs. We have also been recently advised by Council that the construction of the storeroom at the Pascoe Vale Community Centre to house our toy collection has been delayed and will potentially be ready for our use in April 2017.
Thank you. Yeah, I might hand over to Councillor Ratner.
Just very
Yeah.
briefly, thanks very much, Lauren, for the question and for the email. I did follow it up with the director who said he'll provide some information. I understand the report has been delayed and apologies for that. We were hoping to have a report, I think, to inform the budget process. So there has been a delay in that. So I think the CEO might want to add a bit more information, but apologies for that. We are following it up. Yeah.
I was really just going to add through the Mayor that given that you had a date for that report, exactly what you've just basically said about following this up for you, and also the construction timeframes on Pascoe Vale Community Centre, we won't have in front of us, but we can confirm what's actually happening in terms of the readiness of that shed. So we will come back to you after today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
And we have a final question from David Bull.
Thank you. My question's in relation to pedestrian safety, and thank you for the councillors that have met with us, and also especially thank you for Sue for raising it earlier. But I didn't find on the minutes or the on-notice items from an hour and 13 minutes into last council meeting where Janie Miller asked the questions around pedestrian safety. So I just wanted to follow up on those 7 points, 4 of which are with council, in relation to the Moore Street, specifically Moore Street Nicholson intersection, and safety for pedestrians. We understand there are a number of items that are with Vic Roads, and there's a number of items within our control. But I'm also wondering whether, from a third-party perspective, people like Yarra Trams, etc., how can we work to consult Yarra Trams around speeding trams? They admit themselves they're equivalent to 30 rhinoceroses, and they torrent down Nicholson Street at an alarming rate. So I'm wondering, how can we as Moreland, the residents and the council, work with the third parties like Vic Roads and Yarra Trams to help us achieve pedestrian safety in that intersection?
Great, thanks for your question. I might hand over to the Director of City Infrastructure.
Thank you.
Through the Mayor, thanks for your question, David. As commented earlier, I'm not sure what happened on the minutes, but I do know the letter has been progressed internally. I have seen a draft of the letter, so it'll be coming to Janie soon.
Appreciate that, thank you.
In relation to working with Yarra Trams and others, officers regularly meet with various agencies, Vic Roads, Yarra Trams and PTV, etc.
Yep.
We can discuss that issue about whether trams are or aren't speeding and how to improve safety in relation to how the trams operate at our next discussions with them in that regard, and welcome any information that you might have in relation to that you can send to us. We can then talk to Yarra Trams, etc. about.
That'd be much greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your question.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Okay, so that brings us to the end of question time. So we'll now move on to the on-notice items from previous council meeting. And is there a councillor that wishes to move the on-notice items? Councillor Natalie Aboud. Is there a seconder? Councillor Oscar Yildiz. And all those in favour? I declare that carried. So now I might suggest that given the length of the agenda, we've moved the reports by mayor and councillors where councillors just advise the residents of their activities during the past month to the end of the meeting, just to get to the crux of the reports. So is that okay with councillors to do that? Yep, okay. So we'll now move on to the presentation of officers' reports. So the first report that we have is the Assembly of Councillor record for the 1st of June 2017 to the 30th of June. Is there a councillor who wishes to move this report? Councillor Martin. Is there a seconder? Councillor Aboud. All those in favour? I declare that carried. The instrument of delegation from council to positions in the organisation. Is there a councillor to move this report? Yep, Councillor Kavanagh and Councillor Ratnam. And if there's no further debate, I'll put that item to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Okay, so now we're up to the one that I have a conflict of interest, so I'll ask that we appoint a chair. Is there a mover to appoint a chair?
Can I move that the Deputy Mayor take the chair?
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Is there a seconder? Councillor Martin. All those in favour? Okay, I'll now hand the chair over to Councillor Samantha Ratnam.
Councillors, so we've got DCS 4317, approval for mayor to attend 2 forums in Taiwan. Is there a motion for council? Councillor Kavanagh? Councillor Kavanagh,
I wanted to move a slight alternative motion.
Certainly. Please state
To
that.
delete point 5.
Yep.
And I know that since the writing of the agenda, it has been confirmed that that will be paid for by the invitees, and so it will no longer be a burden on the ratepayer.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Aboud, you're happy to second that motion? That's slightly different to the agenda. Councillor Kavanagh, do you wish to speak to this?
I do. I want to make the point that, in a very, I think, important point, is that, particularly with the removal of point 5, it means that there is no cost whatsoever to the ratepayer for this attending of these 2 forums, these 2 important forums. And so, I know that sending councillors and mayors overseas, etc., can be controversial. It's very important to make the point that there will be no cost at all to the ratepayer as a result of accepting this invitation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Aboud, do you wish to speak to this item?
Yeah, I just feel very comfortable about seconding this motion. I think that we've got a great story to tell in Taiwan, considering what we've been able to announce last Saturday, which especially is the launch of the, $1 million funding and also launch of the hydrogen facility, or that work. And also I wanted to also note that I've travelled to conferences with Councillor Davidson, and I think it's worth noting that she takes these things very seriously, and I don't think that even if there was any money involved, this could be considered a junket, and I'm really happy to second this for her.
Thank you, Councillor Aboud. Are there any further speakers to this item? No, in that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried, and we'll just ask the Mayor to return to the chamber. No, don't need a motion. You can just resume the chair.
We don't need a motion to resume that. Okay, great. All right, the next report that we have to consider this evening is the Financial Reserves and Capital Management Policy. Is there a councillor who wishes to move this report? Councillor Samantha Ratnam. Is there a seconder? Councillor Martin. Is there any debate on this? No.
Just very briefly, just to say that the policy was presented to the Audit Committee, and the Audit Committee were very satisfied with it, so it's a it's a new space that we're entering into and provide some new guidelines for the management of our financial reserves.
Great, thank you, Councillor Ratnam. If there's no further discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. The next report we have is a proposed land swap at Waterloo Road in Glenroy, and Councillor Kavanagh is on his feet.
Can I move a slightly alternative recommendation, please? Points 1, 2, 3 and 5 all stay as is, and point 4 just has a slight change of wording. To read, authorises the Director of Corporate Services to do all things necessary to effect the land swap of part of its land at 366 to 370 Waterloo Road, Glenroy, with land owned by Lay Brothers at 358 Waterloo Road, Glenroy, at no less than 90% of the current market value, including the execution of all relevant documentation. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Martin.
I really do think this is a win-win. I think it's it involves swapping some land in what is effectively a car park of Glenroy. When you looked at it, it was a bit of a mishmash where council owned some sections of the car park, private entities owned other sections, and now we're consolidating council's ownership of part of the land and consolidating the private ownership closer to where they will then build an Aldi supermarket. So it's basically making sure that council is fully aware of what is their responsibility for the land, and of course the private entity knowing what's their responsibility for their section of the land. And so I thank officers for their work on this. I thank the Mayor for bringing for her advocacy to make this happen as well. And I think when it's all said and done, it's going to be a win-win.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Is there any further discussion from councillors on this?
Just ask a question about the 90% and why that's not 100.
90.
Yeah, 90% and why that's not 100. Are we effectively giving the private operator 10% discounts?
I'm happy to refer to the Director on that.
Yep.
Just through the Mayor, normally on any of the property type matters, as you know, you enter into a negotiation and it's to give us a little bit of space to negotiate. So you would have seen in previous reports, there's usually a sort of figure and it's 10% either way, usually is where we go. So that's the reason for it. Not that it is the intent to get that outcome. It's just if you resolve to have it exactly the market value and it's $1 less, then we can't do it. So it gives us a little bit of a capacity to enact it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy with that flexibility, but I think the point was to be made to give some direction to officers of what we expect to be the outcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Tafnos. If there's no further discussion on that, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. So the next report we have to consider is the new finance, payroll and HR systems tender and contract. Is there a councillor who wishes to move this? Councillor Martin, is there a seconder? Councillor Riley. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. The next item on the agenda is under City Infrastructure, Cleaner Streets for Moreland. Is there a councillor who wishes to move this? Councillor Martin? Is there a seconder? Councillor Tapanos? Councillor Martin, do you wish to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you. As my fellow councillors and many of the other residents here in the gallery tonight may be aware that waste is one of the areas which I am quite passionate about. And I think this report's fantastic. It really highlights the value of trialling new products moving forward. And so this is looking at the big belly bins. And I think some of the numbers in that report really show the value of investing in these big belly bins. Looking from, we're moving from regular bins needing to be emptied about 182 times per month, and these big belly bins being needed to be emptied 65 times per month. So we're seeing efficiency gains of about 180% there. So what we're delivering is cleaner streets in Moreland, so there's less rubbish overflowing out of the bins, less need for street cleaning, which this report also touches on, and new innovative ways that we're looking to to do street cleaning as well as the frequency. And so I commend this report, and I think it's really important that council continues to investigate looking at new initiatives around waste, because we all know at the end of the day it gets washed out into our drains and then out into our creeks, rivers, and then eventually out into the ocean. So I think it's really important that we take active steps to prevent that from happening, and so I'd like to commend this report.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Tapanos?
Thanks, Mayor. It's great to see the report actually presented and see the efficiencies that have been made, but this is a core area of council business, and one that we need to keep working on and making sure that those efficiencies are actually implemented. We can identify more and more as technology gets better. So it's great to see the bigger bins that are emptied less, and it's great to see that being investigated. It's great to see that street sweeping of streets, which was a real concern and still remains a concern, but we are addressing that issue, and that is very much at the forefront of our agenda. And then there are a whole range of other issues in regards to dump rubbish. So although I think that this report is a welcome focus and some great work's happened, I just wanted to emphasise that we need to constantly keep this on our radar and keep looking for those improvements, because there are some great innovative approaches to street sweeping, rubbish collection and litter programs, and this council should be at the forefront of trying to implement those. And I must say as well, I know it wasn't a big part of this initial general business item, which I believe I moved about a year and a half ago, but we still need to make sure that we are investigating that street recycling mechanism as well. So making sure that we are one of the municipalities that will put recycling bins in our public places, on Sydney Road, on Lygon Street, in Vic Mall as well. And I think that is an objective that we still need to keep at the forefront of our minds as well.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Bolton?
I would like to make one other comment. I'm not moving any amendment or anything. At the moment, I haven't got a practical proposal in mind, but it's about the street weed spraying. Certainly, I'd like to see us move away from the use of Roundup for the spraying of weeds. But also, I get a lot of complaints from residents about not just litter and so forth, but also about the fact that, you know, like the streets do look quite ugly when you have dead weeds which stay there for months and months and months before they eventually meld into the ground. And I must admit, I sort of feel like the old-fashioned way of whippersnip rather than weed spray is, looks much better on the streets. But anyway, that's just something that has been raised with me, but I've got something on the agenda tonight about weed spray.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Is there any further discussion from councillors? No, in that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Sorry, Councillor Yildiz, are you abstaining from voting, or?
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry.
Yep, so all those in favour? I declare that carried. We'll now move on to the Urban Forest Strategy for 2017 to 2027, and Councillor Martin wishes to move that.
I'm happy to move it with a couple of amendments,
sure,
if that's permissible. So I'll just like to add in two additional dot points there. The first one being adopting the strategy with a goal to planting 5,000 trees per year, with the adequate resources for planting within season and ongoing maintenance to best ensure survival. And a point 5 notes that the adequate budget resources have been allocated in the 2017-18 budget to achieve these planting and maintenance goals. And if I have a second, I'm happy to talk to it a little bit more.
Councillor Abood. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, so I mean, what can I say? This strategy is an absolutely fantastic strategy. It is probably one of the most robust pieces of work that I've ever seen come out of council. So the officers really should be commended on the quality of this. We're looking at things, initially we're looking to get greater canopy, it's planting more trees, it addresses urban heat island effect, improves the air quality, you have more bird life, you have windbreaks. It really does improve the look and feel of the community, and I think that is really something that we're trying to strive for and move forward to achieve as a council. I'd like to explain the 5,000 a little bit more in a little bit more detail. So there's been a little bit of confusion around the planting of 5,000 trees, Initially, that's what we always do. We've done 5,000 trees each year, but we've seen some issues around the tree survival rates, watering, and so the urban forest strategy actually addresses those techniques around maintenance, around planting, and what we're doing is we've ensured that there's an extra $500,000 in the budget to cater for that extra 1,500 trees. And so that's what we've done, and we're committed to that in the budget, and we're committing to it again tonight. So I really encourage my fellow councillors to support this amazing strategy and to also support the amendment of an extra 1,500 trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Are there any further speakers? Seconder, do you wish to speak to this? Councillor Bolton?
I've got a couple of amendments. So one of my amendments, which was sent through earlier today, is to add at the end of point 2, with the addition of a new point 7.7 at action item 7, strengthen community custodianship and engagement of the urban forest, to read annual online publication of the proposed street and park tree planting program prior to the commencement of the planting season, including but not limited to the following information: specific location for each tree being planted and the species being planted at that location.
Right.
So I don't know if maybe mover and seconder might consider absorbing that.
I'd like to see it actually up on the screen for him.
So just through the Mayor, we're just accessing your email and just putting it on the screen. It'll be there in a few seconds. Just catching up.
So it is page 319.
So just to check with Councillor Bolton, they are the points that you're talking about?
Yeah, so those are my 2 amendments.
Can I ask a question to the officers? It seems like there may be, it may be quite resource intensive to actually follow through with the last part specifically.
Which one, point 2 or point 4?
Where it says the specific location of each tree being planted and the species being planted. I'm just wondering if it might be a little bit too resource intensive. I wonder if you could just comment on that. Thank you.
Through the Mayor, we currently have a database that shows that forward planning, so it'll be a matter of converting that to something that can be provided on the web. So we currently have the address, the species and that detail, so it'd just be the machinations of getting it on the web.
Right.
And so this is where we're just talking about the first point. We're not talking about point 4.
So yeah, if you want to absorb one or both of the points into the motion, that'd be fine with me. So yeah, up to you. Otherwise, I'll just move them and see if anyone seconds.
I believe I'm supportive of the first half, but not the second half.
Not the point 4.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
So you're accepting the
So the part that's
Point 2.
highlighted, you're accepting into the substantive.
Yeah, I'm okay if it's all right with the seconder as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep. Councillor Bolton, did you
So
wish?
I'll go ahead with my other amendment, which is the word for report to add a new point 4 to read: for a report to come back to the October Council meeting detailing and analysing the costs of various tree planting scenarios, including ongoing costs such as maintenance and watering, so that councillors can make an informed decision on whether the $500,000 budget allocated to the tree planting program needs to be increased.
Okay. So is there a seconder? Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Aboud?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that that point 6 is actually something that we're revisiting later, and it wasn't part of Councillor Martin's amendment.
Delete.
So we just need to delete that.
Thank you
It's
for
not part of the substantive.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was wondering where that came from.
Okay, Councillor Bolton, did you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, I do wish to speak to it. If I was quite attracted to supporting the proposal in the report for fewer trees but better maintained, because we have had such a major loss of trees in Moreland, loss of trees which have been planted, and I was attracted to the strategy of planting more mature trees with a lot more resources spent on maintenance to ensure that actually do survive, rather than have an arbitrary figure where a lot of trees don't survive. So if the view of the council is to increase the number of trees planted to $5,000, I'm nervous that we don't have enough money in our budget allocated to sustain the increased number of trees being advocated in the amended resolution moved by Councillor Martin. So that's why I believe this should come back to the a further report to the October council meeting. I very much into seeing more trees planted and surviving to create canopy, and I'm very excited to see the urban forest strategy come to this point after I moved the motion to investigate this a few years ago. But I just am worried that we're going to shortchange it by an increase in the number of trees we plant, that we haven't really adequately budgeted for maintenance and planting mature trees.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a procedural point? I presume it's a 0.6 that you're looking for, isn't it? It was originally 0.4 because there was a table.
Yeah, that's right. I wasn't aware of the other.
Councillor Ratnam and then Councillor Abood.
I think on the second up.
Sorry?
No.
Councillor Tapanos, did you wish to
Yes,
speak to
yes,
that?
I do. Yeah. Thank you. Firstly, can I say generally on the report, not on the amendment, it's a great piece of work. Well done to everyone. And well done, I must note that must be one of the biggest amounts of submissions that we've received as well. It's a great result and it shows the level of community interest. So I wanted to say that, which also means that we should get this right. We really should. And I know from being at numerous forums across Brunswick, but across the city as well, is that we often talk about the survival rate of trees, and it's something that we've grappled with, and I'm glad that it's something that we, and particularly our officers, are understanding better and have made their recommendation and the content of the report for that reason. I think it is important to understand the costs, the real costs that are associated with a particular tree planting. And that's why I support this amendment and this dot point, because really it is calling for more information. It is calling for information and some research for us to understand what does a tree cost to maintain over time for it to survive. And I'm not sure whether we have that work or we really understand that in the complex environment. And when I say complex environment, it's not one site fits all, and it's not one species fits all. So we have trees in different locations across the city. We have trees that have different species of trees, and it would be great to understand the level of care, the level of need, the level of watering, the level of pruning, and what is their cost to make sure that each and every tree we do plant survives. Because currently, and I've heard figures of up to 50% don't survive. So whilst we may think that 5,000 is a great headline and we think that that's great, I'm not interested in headlines or delivering on a figure which we can talk about and give ourselves a pat on the back when the reality is half of those trees aren't surviving. I'm interested in the result, in getting the outcome, in addressing the issue, a very serious issue, which goes to the heat island effect as well. So I'm interested in making sure that we get that information, we know what the real cost is, so we can plan, we can budget, and we can make sure that each and every tree we put in there has the best chance of survival. And I don't think we do that right at the moment, and I don't think we're going to do it right in the moment unless we do that work, get that report, and be able to plan through our budget process, through our policies forward in the future. So I think that's a great piece of work, and I commend Councillor Bolton for moving that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Now, at this point, I'll just seek some clarification because my understanding was that we have done this work. So the work has been done to incorporate the long-term survival of these trees within our budget, and that includes things like the watering costs for 5,000 trees, the mulch that's required, there's a particular sort of dam that's going around them to ensure the water doesn't drain off. So all that groundwork to make sure that we could support the potential of having 5,000 trees across Moreland that are about 2.5 metres tall, that are somewhat mature, to ensure that they have the best ability to survive has been done. But I'll double check that. I'll hand over to the Director of City Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, you are correct in the sense that work has been done as part of the strategy and was also included in the options that were undertaken as part of the consultation. There were 3 different options. The additional $500,000 that increased the tree planting from 3,500 to 5,000 means all those 5,000 trees would still get the same level of care when they're planted, same level of care when they're in the early years of their establishment. It has been costed to include that. In the sense of preparing a further report, I'm not sure what further information could be provided that is not in the report tonight and part of the consultation work.
Thank you. Is there any... Councillor Ratnam.
Just in terms of the motion put forward, I too second that I believe the work has been done. There have been a number of councillors who've been following this work very closely since the draft strategy was proposed to council. The amendment that Councillor Martin, or the revised motion that Councillor Martin put to the chamber, is not something that was just plucked out tonight. That was actually detailed and proposed with the draft strategy, so lots of thought and consideration and follow-up has occurred, and councillors would have received an email with further detail from the director today outlining the maintenance and clarifying the concerns and questions we had about whether the maintenance was the same with both scenarios of 3, 5 or 5,000. Both have increased maintenance than what we've done before, so we have done that work to ensure that we're going to get greater survival rates. My fear is that we're asking for more work to be done. I've got no problem with the transparency. We are going to have to review this, but we're about to embark on a really, really ambitious program. Really want to give the officers a chance to get the program happening and get those 5,000 trees in the ground and surviving. We're asking for more layers and layers of more work that I don't want to stymie the ambitious goals that we put before us. I'd be happy for us to receive a briefing. We're going to have to monitor this very closely. I assume that we would have been getting quite regular briefings anyway about how it was going, any problems, any extra budget that we need to ensure that the goal was reached. So I'd be happier if I'm not supportive of it in its current form. I'd be happier if it said that we receive a briefing in a few months about how it's progressing. Councillors at any time can bring a notice of motion and put that same amendment up if they believe it's not going well. But I think we have to give this a chance to work. The work has been done, and I implore councillors to follow up on the work that has been done by over months by their fellow councillors to get this to this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Tapanos?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just a little bit confused because I'm hearing from one side the work has been done, in which case what is the problem with presenting it in a report? But then on the other hand, I'm hearing this is too much work for officers. So I think if the work has been done, let's put it in front in a report, have it assessed by the community, have it in the open, have it in this chamber.
Sorry.
I mean, I'm also happy to meet with officers to outline a little bit more of the way the information I would like it presented. I would like to see per tree.
So you've already spoken once, and I believe...
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought I had 3 minutes, but yes, that's fine.
So you've already spoken once, but that doesn't incorporate the 3 minutes. But
okay, well,
Councillor
you shouldn't have
Martin.
called me then.
I think, councillors, what this, and I know this is a little bit of concern and a little bit of confusion that may have been happening, and Councillor Tapanos might not be across the strategy because he has been on holiday for the last couple of months. So what we have before us is a lot of hard work and consultation with officers over the last 2 months through the draft, through the drafting of this strategy and also through the budgeting process. So this isn't a number that's just been whipped out of thin air. This has been done with consultation with officers, and I think it's irresponsible to say that this is just something that we've just whipped up completely out of nothing. So I really firmly believe that 5,000 trees, it will lead to street tree saturation in 2019, and what that means is then from 2019 onwards, we can focus on planting in parks, we can focus on how we tackle the issue of trees being removed out of the private domain. And so these are issues that we need to look forward and focus on. And I think this strategy and the extra planting and the amazing work that has gone into this strategy will see these 5,000 trees have a much higher survival rate than the 5,000 trees that have ever been planted previously. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Carly Hannan.
So if this motion doesn't get up by Councillor Martin, that I'll foreshadow the...
Sorry, it's Councillor Bolton.
The amendment.
Who
Oh,
has
the
proposed
amendment we're talking on? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's just the
We're just talking
point
amendment?
6,
Oh,
just
okay,
that
that's all right. I'll
specific
talk
one
about it.
point.
That's fine.
Councillor Abood.
I'm speaking specifically to the point 6 amendment, which was put up by Councillor Bolton and seconded by Councillor Tapanos. I don't think that there's any reason for us to have 2 months, in 2 months' time, another report back about scenarios that are included in the big report that that has been brought back to the table today. I think that it's not necessarily the councillor's decision to decide how the $500,000 is spent in terms of making sure that the trees are cared for properly. And I think that some of that information is actually included in the other points of the motion, including the part where it says with adequate resources for planting within season and ongoing maintenance. So I won't be supporting the amended point 6.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Are there any further speakers? No, if that's the case, I'll put Councillor Bolton's additional point to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that lost. We'll now return to the substantive motion. Is there any further? Councillor Bolton. Abood.
I just want to commend this remarkable work. I think that the detail that has gone into this has kind of been lost in this debate right now. I think it's very important that we commend the officers for not only the preparation of this document but also their engagement. There were lots of people who made submissions, which is in this report, but also many people who just engaged in the consultation by having conversations out in the field, so to speak. And I think that what we're doing here is buying 2 years of canopy. So by increasing the number of trees to 5,000 and leaving the $500,000 in this year's budget to make sure that there's enough money to do that successfully. And I know this because we've had a lot of backwards and forwards this week from Monday since we had a briefing about this and lots of emails, that we will be able to have what's called saturation of the public realm with the canopy in 2019 instead of 2021. And that's why I'm quite happy to second these amendments, and I'm looking forward to seeing more and more trees across the city.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Abood. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Bolton.
I would like to draw attention to another aspect of this urban forest strategy, which is also the protection of significant trees. And I think this is quite a major issue because as fast as council's been increasing the number of street trees, they've been destroyed by private developers. So I think this is something the whole strategy, I believe, will be publicised by council, but I think especially the fact that there will be a significant tree register, and I think we really do want to inform the community to make use of the significant tree register, because council officers won't necessarily know every tree in the municipality, I'm sure. So it'll be really reliant on members of the public. So I think that's an important point, and plus it talks about the planning laws, and we probably need to keep looking at our planning laws in terms of trying to force developers to put fewer units on a block of land and put a tree there. I think that would be a really important step forward if we can, get developers to start to plant canopy trees, not just little spiky bushes and pebbles. So I think that's really important. And there are many, many positive features of this document, but I certainly think we need to go to town about it. And I think in the city of Melbourne, the urban forest strategy there has been a really incredibly popular strategy with people actually adopting trees and so forth. So it's been a very very much supported by the community.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Carly Hannon.
Yeah. So I think that this piece of work has been an excellent piece of work, and that the main thing that the community care about, and the reason that we have had so many submissions, is that really the heat island effect, the issue that we have with how hot our city is becoming, and the fact that we don't have enough canopy. So really for me, this strategy, whichever way we were to take it, would really see a massive benefit for our community. My preference would probably be to stick with the 3,500 trees in order to ensure that we're doing an excellent job, and to be having that additional money there so that we can be following our progress. However, I also recognise the piece of work that the officers have done, and meeting with Grant today, feel comfortable that the officers are aware of all the implications and are thinking forward, and we are recognising our past mistakes. So I guess for me, I didn't support the report coming back straight away that we put as the amendment, but I do think that we definitely want to know how we're going, and we're going to be paying attention a lot more to seeing that these trees are well maintained and that we're actually getting the benefits and the outcome that we want to see for our community.
Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. Councillor Riley.
Thanks. Just to support the comments of the mover and the seconder, and Councillor Carly Hannon as well, that the urgency on urban heat island effect and the impacts of climate change are quite, so I think they're so significant that the 2 years is quite an important period to actually cover. And I just want to reiterate that the issue around these figures continue in the debate to continue to be thrown around. We've discussed this amongst ourselves, those who've been reading their emails today and yesterday, and who attended the councillor briefing on Monday to clarify this. And the increase in the numbers and the consequential funding is to ensure that the scenario that was put to you at the forums that people went to was to make sure that we would be able to maintain and keep those trees, and also to try and make sure that if there are any significant, dangerous sort of weather effects, that we could actually have people step up and look after those trees. There's no guarantee that we will do that. We will be relying on the community to make sure that when we hit those spots, that people can actually take that extra half bucket of water out to the trees when they most need them. So this is something we're going to need to engage on, and I hope that we continue to do this, to actually put to bed this question around the figures, because I think it's quite concerning that we're still having this debate and that we're still questioning that. And we've been reassured that in fact the whole reason for this extra $500,000 each year is to try and ensure that we actually do meet the increased planting and the increased maintenance and care for those trees. And I really invite everyone to partake in that, and hope that we can actually get a report back, perhaps not in 2 months, but soon, to actually indicate how that's going, because it's been a very important report. And thank you to all the officers for all their work.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Tapanossis.
I was saying before, it is important that we do get this right, because of just how important it is and how much of a big issue it is in our city. Members of the gallery might see the debate in the chamber, but that's because we're also passionate about making sure that we have sufficient canopy cover in our city, and we have improved retention rates, I guess, or survival rates of the trees that we do plant. And sometimes we do need to experiment a little bit. So we've increased the number and we've put in more money. But it would be great to also know how much money some of the other municipalities spend and how much tree plantings they do, because I suspect it still isn't enough. I suspect the money we have in the budget still isn't enough if we're going to achieve the best result. But I guess we will find that out in the future, and I'm glad to hear from my fellow councillors a reassurance about the budget implications of this, and that there is sufficient money. I guess we will wait and see in the future, and I hope that they are proven right, and we have increased quite substantially the survival rate of those trees. I really do. But I guess we'll go through that process and time will tell.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. If there's no further discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. And I'll ask that... Sorry?
Could I please have that recorded as an unanimous?
Yes, I
Thank
was
you.
just about to ask that. Okay, we'll now move on to... We'll now move on to social development, and we have the report for Fleming Park Master Plan. Is there a councillor who wishes to move this report? Councillor Riley, and seconded by Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Riley, do you wish to speak to it?
Thanks. Just briefly, I just wish to support this Fleming Park Master Plan refresh because since coming to being elected, it's become quite an important issue for we councillors in the south, but I think for councillors generally in terms of the level of development that's going on in our city and the pressures that are coming on, particularly in the East Brunswick area. And this park is quite a significant park and open space, and we know the value, we've just been talking about the value of our green space. And in order to get this right, it's important that we listen to the community, and which is what we've been doing. And I really would like to thank the officers and all of the different departments, because there are many departments involved in this, for agreeing to defer this and to actually look at the master plan and try and ensure that we actually get it refreshed and as accurate as possible for 2017, so that we can actually do the best work on this park. There is, just for those who aren't clear, there are some very green parts of that park, but there's some also brown bits, which again tend to have some particular buildings put on them. But those questions are up for your input and discussion, and we invite you to have a say about what should go in or should not go in around that park, because there are many sporting parts. There's the bocce, there's the bowling green, as well as the oval, etc. So there's a lot of discussion to have on this, and I really look forward to hearing people's input onto it. So I commend the recommendation as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Ratner? No? Is there any further discussion from councillors? No. If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. And the next report we have to consider is Trevor Turbo Brown, the commemoration. Councillor Abood.
Yes, I'd just like to put forward some an alternate recommendation. So I'll read them out, and if I have a seconder, I'll talk to it. So point 1, that council investigates a suitable location to permanently exhibit a piece of Trevor Turbo Brown's artwork with an accompanying artwork label and biography. Point 2, that council continues discussions with the Office of Geographic Names Victoria for proposed use of Trevor Turbo Brown as a commemorative name. And point 3, if the use of Trevor Turbo Brown is approved as a commemorative name, that council also seeks a suitable location, so a street, park or building to name in his memory.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. So as everybody knows, sadly Turbo Brown passed away too early in December at the start of this year, 2017. He's a prominent Indigenous artist who spent his time between Mildura and Brunswick. And council has made contact with a couple of members of Turbo's family who have expressed an interest in being involved in creating some kind of memorial to Trevor. And council has also been in touch with the Mildura Council, which was part of an earlier nom that I put forward, to find out if the council is creating any kind of a similar memorial. And so far we don't think that is the case, but I think it would be nice if maybe that might happen. And so I think that by changing the recommendation, this way will ensure that something that is worthy of the man is left in the city. I think that it's a really important thing that we recognise Indigenous artists, and especially any local artists, but I think that there's no denying what a talented painter Turbo was, and just what a remarkable way he had of, putting images on paper, images on canvas, depicting his connection to the land and the animals that live on it. And, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing something spectacular being left in the city in his memory. So I hope we have some success.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Councillor Riley? No, is there any further discussion from councillors? No, in that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. The next item on the agenda is the Moreland Arts Board, terms of reference. Is there a councillor who wishes to move that? Councillor Riley? Is there a seconder? Councillor Carly Hannon. Councillor Riley, do you wish to speak to that?
No, just quickly to thank the officers for their work on this, and for all the former board members who participated in the current, or the one that's about to expire, and to encourage people to consider being involved in this, because we're actually also currently looking at our current arts and culture policy. So it's not too late to have some input into that. That closes next Monday, but I'd really encourage people to consider being involved in this committee. If you can't actually get on the committee, then come along and listen, come along and attend those meetings and be part of those, and certainly be part of the policy development that's happening currently. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Riley. Councillor Carly Hannon, do you wish to add anything? No? Is there any further discussion from councillors? No? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. The next item is 2017 Brunswick Music Festival and Sydney Road Street Party. Is there a councillor who wishes to move that report? Councillor Ratnam? Is there a seconder? Councillor Riley. Councillor Ratnam, do you wish to speak to that?
So this report outlines the achievements of the Brunswick Music Festival and Sydney Road Street Party as auspiced by the Council for the first time in-house last year. It provides some excellent details of the numbers of patrons that we reached and some ideas and suggestions for improvement as well. One of the things that we're embarking upon is to develop some new performance objectives. The start time a little bit later based on the feedback, but that process is going to be really interesting as we strengthen the way that we deliver it as a council as well. So there was some debate when this was presented the first time. This has come back to us now with some of the financial reports. I'm very satisfied with the report.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Riley?
Just to briefly add, thank you, Councillor Ratnam, for those words. That in terms of the later finish that has been put up, it's actually been quite remarkable. The Sydney Road Street Party is like one of the longest running community street parties we have, and in fact it seems to me that one of the reasons why is because we don't actually finish it late, and it doesn't turn into an alcohol or drug fueled kind of summer soiree, which actually means that many people can be involved in it and partake. And I think that I really listened to what the officers' advice on this, and I would like to preserve the longevity of this and see that it runs for another 10, 20 years or more, and that in fact we'd be very careful about those things. Because even though I'd love to have an evening party, like many people, I think because of the nature of it and the way that some of these things can develop, I think it's really important that we get it right. So I'm not averse to going that way in the future, but I think if we do that, we need to be really manage it carefully and wisely. So I really just wanted to highlight that aspect of it as well, particularly given the issues around Sydney Road and what happens when people are spilling out of some of those venues, or other venues along that road on a normal weeknight. And there's a nom coming up later in the meeting about that.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Abood.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm looking forward to this work, this festival becoming better than it, or more great than it already is. But I just wanted to note in the report that the report states 43.3% of artists across the festival were from culturally diverse backgrounds, and I'm pretty sure that more than 43.3% of the city is from culturally diverse backgrounds, so I'm glad that that point falls in there. And I also wanted to note that we are aware that there were two accessibility issues recorded in the last, reported at the last Brunswick Street Festival and Sydney Road Street Party. And so I just want to also draw attention to the fact that community engagement, but also accessibility.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Are there any further speakers on this? No. I'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Now we're moving on to planning and economic development. So we have the amendment C164, Brunswick Activity Centre Industrial Land Rezoning Decision. Gateway 1, authorisation and exhibition. Is there a councillor who wishes to move this report? Councillor Gilders? Is there a seconder? Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Gilders, do you wish to speak to that?
Not right now.
Right. Councillor Kavanagh?
No, thank you.
No. Are there any further councillors who wish to speak on this report? No. If that's the case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. And the next report we have is City Development Activity Report for the June quarter 2017. Councillor Kavanagh. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ratnam? Councillor Kavanagh?
Yeah, I just want to point out a couple of points in this. As I mentioned, every time these quarterly figures come up, I always enjoy these reports. And, I don't know, something odd about me, but anyway, that's fine. Can I say that a couple of things that jump out at me at these figures is that if we look at 2015, 2016, we had 1,976 planning applications in that year. By the way, I noticed that 1,975 planning applications were decided, so we missed out by one on that. But this year, in the last financial year, we're 1,648. Now, if you look at that 1,648 and we then look at the VCAT appeals, we had 100 VCAT appeals, of which 68 of the decisions by VCAT were to support council's decision and 32 were to knock them back. So of the 1,695 decisions made, 1,663 of them were made actually by council or endorsed by VCAT council's decision. So in other words, over 98% of our decisions do stand. We often think that everything's going to get appealed to VCAT and we'll lose. But in fact, as I say, over 98% of decisions by council stood. I think that's very, very important to know. I think it shows that what happens in the offices and what happens in this chamber at UPC are really important because they do stand up against the scrutiny of VCAT, etc. Can I also make the point when we look at the number of planning applications that have been determined, and this is the first time I've seen like 7 financial years back to back. So since 2010, looking at this, by my recollection, 11,705 planning applications have been decided. Right? Now, when I think of in 2010, from memory, we had 62,000 rateable properties. So around 20% of Moreland's rateable properties have had a planning application in the last 7 years. No wonder people are talking about the change in their areas, etc. So if you think of that, every 5th property has had a planning application in the last 7 years. I find that quite staggering. So.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Ratnam.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh, for that very comprehensive summary of the report. It is a very rich report and it helps us communicate to the community regularly about the development activity we're seeing in the city. I just want to draw Councillor's attention, particularly as it pertains to our Urban Planning Committee, where we interact with this, the planning work of council, the very significant planning work of council, and looking at the win-loss ratio for decisions by the Urban Planning Committee over the last couple of years at VCAT. We seem to turn the ship around a little bit. It signals that council is making some good decisions because our win-loss ratio, we're winning more than we're losing at VCAT over the last 2 years. So commendation to the urban planning councillors and hope we can keep that ratio up. And I think that's particularly important because the Urban Planning Committee gets some of the most complex and some of the biggest decisions seen across the planning department. So we get to make decisions. The majority of decisions are made under delegation because there's such a volume, but we get decisions that have either over or above the structure plan, the planning scheme, rules and regulations, and preferred type of character that we want to see when they have received significant community objection. Those are the types of thresholds that it has to meet to come to the Urban Planning Committee. So every decision is deliberated on very carefully. There's a very significant debate. Sometimes an officer there's an officer recommendation, and sometimes the Urban Planning Committee will make a decision that's contrary to that officer recommendation. And it's a tough decision, but years of experience helps inform that decision. And I think those numbers are saying that the Urban Planning Committee is making some very good decisions. So we hope that trend continues.
Thank you, Councillor Ratton. Is there any further discussion from councillors on that? In that case, I'll put that report to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Now, the next item on the agenda is Amendment C170, Grom Place in Brunswick West.
I'd like to move this with a slight amendment.
Sure. Councillor Bolton.
So, the motion is that Council notes its previous resolutions in regard to public housing as relevant to Grom Place, Brunswick West, Plan Melbourne and consultative requirements for new overlays as detailed in section 2 of this report. 2, endorse the Moreland City Council submission to Standing Advisory Committee for Redevelopment of Grom Place, Brunswick West, July 2017 at attachment 1 to this report. And the slight amendment is with the final dot point on page 1 of the submission to include the words "and that the entire parcel of land remain publicly owned." Then number 3 continues to advocate to the state government for increased investment in public and affordable housing in Moreland and support for advocacy items identified in the Moreland Affordable Housing Strategy 2014 to 2018.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Ratnam to second. Councillor Bolton, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, I would like to speak to this. I think just recently Moreland Council passed quite a good resolution around the public housing redevelopment and was more focused just on the one in Moreland at Brunswick West. And the reason I'm adding this extra little bit is after doing some research about this program that's known as public housing renewal, I actually think that is a misnomer, even though it's its public name. I actually think this is a great sell-off of public land and to private developers. I think that's its main purpose, with the so-called public housing renewal just being used as a fig leaf to try and justify the sell-off of public land. Half in the Brunswick West estate, half of the dwellings will be, around half, will be private dwellings. The plan is, I mean, Moreland's putting in a submission, if this gets passed, which opposes some of these features, but these developments across Melbourne will be exempt from local planning schemes and they'll be fast-tracked. Most of the residents, public housing tenants, will not be allowed back because, for example, the West Brunswick estate is currently mostly 3-bedroom units with a lot of families, especially a lot of African families who've been already displaced once, twice or 3 times, and they'll face displacement again because these are long-term secure public housing tenancies, which means you have long-term well-established communities where people look after each other's kids, look after each other, and that community is going to be totally dispersed to the winds, and there's no guarantee they'll be able to come back. And the experience of the Carlton redevelopment and the Kensington redevelopment is that most people are not allowed to come back, not allowed to return, and I think that is a crying shame to destroy a really close-knit community. And this will be really quite disastrous. And at the moment, there's no guarantee that the social housing on these sites after redevelopment will be public housing. They'll most likely be community housing where people won't have such permanent tenancies, they'll pay higher rent, and they house very few people on vulnerable incomes. So this is actually a disaster that's about to happen across Melbourne unless we actually stop what's being planned. This needs to be genuine public housing to deal with the housing crisis right now. So that's why I've put in that extra little dot point about no sell-off of public land.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Ratnam?
I wholeheartedly agree with all Councillor Bolton's sentiments and her amendments as well. Just want to commend the officers for their work on the submission. It's a very, very strong submission and really signals the intent of this council and the wish of this council to fight really hard to raise awareness fight against what's happening in terms of the privatisation of this public housing and raise awareness in the community about what's happening. The submission was very strong and I was very pleased to read that, but in reading it, it made me actually very, very sad. The whole context of what's happening, you know, we often scratch our heads going, how do we get here where there's 30,000 people on the list for public housing? How do we get here that we're seeing more and more people living in such an affluent society, sleeping on the streets? You know, it's one of the richest countries in the world. We have people sleeping on the streets, and that's just growing every day in number. People don't have enough resources to put a roof over their head. And we wonder, how does this slow erosion happen? This is how the slow erosion happens. And sometimes not that slow, it's really fast, as the state government is doing. I'm absolutely aghast that this proposal is coming across Victoria. It's happening council by council, and councils are being asked to relinquish their planning rights, the residents' rights, and the residents of those public housing estates' rights are being weakened to barely nothing. I attended the first consultation. I believe there's more to come, but it's very concerning what's happening, and we've got to do everything we can to fight what's happening here.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Kavanagh.
Yeah, just a couple of things for me. Firstly, can I congratulate Councillor Bolton and Councillor Ratnam on not just the eloquence of the way they've spoken tonight, but on their continual advocacy on this particular topic. I know it's been something that's been passionate about for a long time, and I admire that part. I also think that, I agree, it's an excellent submission, but I do make the point, I think it also is an excellent submission because Council around this table made their position very early about what we believed and what we stood for, and that's deeply fed into the submission. I think sometimes we can wait for our officers and then have our views. I think we were front and centre, and we've said it right from the very beginning, and we're not going to back off from it. And I think that's really important. And I think when elected representatives make that clear, I think that everybody benefits from it. And hopefully we'll see some benefit for the residents of here, and hopefully for those in other parts of Victoria as well. Because you're exactly right. What's happening is a disgrace. I remember in the 70s, I would have been at secondary school, and I remember we had a teacher there who was American. They had an American program of sending American teachers. And he had photographs of people in the streets of Chicago, sleeping out on the streets of Chicago. And I remember he said to the class, and I think I was in Form 3 at the time, Year 9, oh, how proud you are in Australia that you don't have these sites in Australia. And here we are, 40 years later, and we do. You know, it's what a deterioration.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Abood.
I'm rising to support and commend these amendments and the report and the submission. I grew up in Carlton when it was full of housing commission flats and also quite a few houses dotted around. And now I'm hearing things in the media like scenarios where the government wants to get rid of one older lady who's been living in that house you know, for maybe 45 years because there's two bedrooms in the house, or change it up a bit. And I think this sounds a little bit like an episode of Utopia, which my life feels like sometimes, but it's actually eroding the fabric of the society that we live in. Because what's happening is, instead of Carlton being full of quite a few rat bags, including me when I was a kid, as well as some people who had a lot of money who could afford to live in big opulent houses in the street, there was a really genuine mix of people living in that particular suburb. And what's happening is gentrification is kind of creeping through and cleansing the areas from the CBD outwards, and it's reached Brunswick. Obviously, that's why this is on the state government's agenda. And so I think it's really important for us to, and obviously this is stuff that I'm becoming, you know, more aware of quite recently because of the leadership of, you know, other members of the council who know this work much better than I do. But I think that it's really important to keep a very close eye on this kind of stuff and make sure that we send a very clear message that Moreland City Council doesn't want to cleanse our community, and we think that what a community is having people from all different, you know, walks of life and socio-economic groups living in the city.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Are there any further speakers on this? In that case, I'll put
just a couple of brief points in closing. In answer to Councillor Ratnam's comments, I think the reason this has all come to pass is connected to Australia following the British model, where they've basically privatised most council housing, and a similar things happening all over Australia, including public housing tenants in Millers Point in Sydney, where there's been a big battle to stop eviction, and people have been dispersed. Elderly people who've lived there all their lives have been dispersed to the winds, and it is part of a bigger battle around privatisation of public services. And councillors are absolutely right that right now, when we've got escalating homelessness and declining incomes, we need public housing more than ever, and we should actually be increasing it rather than decreasing it. And there is some figures available which indicate that over the years, regardless of which government's been in power, public housing's been making a profit out of the rents that people have been paying, but that money's gone into general coffers rather than back into renovating public housing.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. If there's no further discussion from councillors, I'll put
Can I
that...
just say very quickly, I mean, we've got some great...
I
should close the debate.
Okay. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. And we'll now move on to the next report, which is multi-use community facility at 33 Saxon Street in Brunswick, and Councillor Riley is on his feet.
Thank you. I just want to move this recommendation that adopts the strategic framework for Council's multi-use facility at 33 Saxon Street in Brunswick, which is in attachment 1, and that we note the strategic needs and opportunities for the site and the civic cultural precinct of Brunswick as is outlined in attachment 2. We're going to undertake the community engagement in the strategic framework in the future of the site and commence preparation for a concept plan for the site of Council's consideration. These are really important steps in the journey for this site. It's really well situated in behind St Ambrose Church, between the Brunswick Baths.
Councillor Riley, I will note that I saw Councillor Ratnam as a seconder, so please continue.
Sorry.
Yes, that's okay.
And this site has been in Council's hand for a couple of years when we actually upgraded the Brunswick Baths, and we've now put some of that land towards the Brunswick Baths, and there are some great opportunities in this civic precinct. In the development of that from around 2014, there have been a couple of other expressions of interest. The Black Dot Gallery set up there, and I encourage people to go and visit if you haven't already. They do some great exhibitions. The Hope Street and Youth Family Services were, as a part of the outcome of looking to put them in there, have actually been housed in the Town Hall office space on the first floor. And we also tried to accommodate the Brunswick Neighbourhood House, which unfortunately wasn't able to be accommodated at that stage. So there are a lot of opportunities coming up at this site, and this is going to be a really important part. We're actually kind of at the end of the seed stage of this consideration, and we'll be expecting and hoping that people participate in the next development of this site, where we look at the strategic work and the plans, and we'll get the principles in place for how we go from here and who will actually start to move in and activate that site further. So I think it's in a really opportunistic place for us as a community, and it's just amazing that council was able to get their hands on this land when they did, and the old school site. So I really look forward to this work happening and commend it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Ratnam? No. Councillor Tapanos?
It's great to see that we have 33 Saxon Street sort of on our agenda on a regular basis and a status report. It is true that this decision was an opportunistic one. We saw it up for sale, and we decided, because of its strategic location, adjacent to the pools, which were then being refurbished, and right in the middle of the centre of Brunswick, the train station, our town hall, it was something that was too good to miss up, to not pursue. And we were fortunate enough to be able to pick it up. But I guess as we've put in usages and we've trialled different things, and along the way it's been quite beneficial, both for the redevelopment of the baths, the library redevelopment, and now usages going in there, both the gallery, the current usages that we have. We're starting to formulate a bit more of a view of what is the long-term future for this site. And we need to really do that in consultation with the community. And there are some great ideas out there, whether it's an arts hub, a community hub with a whole bunch of co-located services. So it has the potential to be something really special for our municipality. And I'm glad that we've decided to keep this property, because there was discussion of selling it off some time ago. We've made a strong decision to keep it, and now we need to do that strategic work. And I'm sure that in years to come, people will look back on this council and say they made a tough decision, but a right decision not to get rid of this land, and look at what we have now on it. So I'm really excited to see what this concept plan will look like, but more so I'm really excited to see all the fabulous ideas that would come from the community consultation about it.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. If there's no further discussion from councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. We'll now move on to Pascoe Road construction, stage 4, and Councillor Kavanagh.
I'd like to move the motion on page 747. If I have a second to expect it.
I'll second
Yep. Good, thank you. Can I say how pleased I am to see this report? I was just reflecting when I read this report. I think it would have been about late 2014. We had a Glenroy Advisory Committee meeting, and it was a pretty robust meeting with saying, we've got all these plans, we've got all these stages, but nothing's happening, nothing's happening. So we had 5 stages at that point, and at that point, as I said, nothing was actually works weren't in progress, and we made it pretty clear, the Mayor and myself at that meeting, and that we weren't particularly happy at that stage. Now here we come, not that long later, and we've got stage 1 complete, stage 2 complete, stage 3, and stage 4. But the good news is stage 4 is now stage 4 and 5. So in other words, at the end of this, they're all complete from Finchley all the way down to Gladstone on both sides of the road. So really pleased with that, and really pleased with the proactive work of officers to get those things moving. So really grateful to see this report.
Excellent. And just a seconder, I'd like to thank the officers for all their hard work in getting this to come to fruition. Combining the 2 stages is going to be great for Pascoe Road, and it's the gateway, the northern gateway to Moreland. So it's a particularly important area. And sometimes, as Councillor Kavanagh has said, people think that Glenroy, Oak Park and that sort of side of Moreland is neglected. It's not. We're investing a lot of money into this, and the work is proving to be something that's quite remarkable and very beautiful as well, including Morgan Court, where there will be a lot of festivals. We've got a great little traders group at the moment that's just kicking off and getting their feet on the ground and really acknowledging the work that council is doing. So I'm looking forward to the great business generation and the culture and mingling that's occurring in Glenroy. Now, are there any other councillors who'd like to speak to this? No? In that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, I declare that carried. And the next report we have to consider is the declaration of the Coburg Shopping Precinct Combination Special Rate and Charge Scheme. Councillor Aboud?
Yeah, I just wanted to commend this motion. And so, yeah, I just need a seconder.
Yep. Councillor Martin.
Thanks. I didn't want to change any of the recommendations.
This is the one with the attachment.
Yeah, it's got a confidential attachment, but there's no change to the resolution.
Okay,
Sorry. And we'll deal with this.
Yeah, it was just information.
Yeah, no change. I just wanted to acknowledge this work because I know that there were a few submissions and that there were a few people who are a little bit dubious about this particular charge. But I wanted to acknowledge the work of the Coburg Traders Association. I spend quite a lot of time down the street at Coburg when I'm not up here and not doing everything else that I'm doing. And I've just noticed some really amazing changes, specifically lots of blocks of colour. And I think that, you know, I'm starting to really appreciate the street myself, and I expect that this will have an ongoing effect with, you know, other people coming to the neighbourhood, but also wanting to hang around and, you know, spend money up there. And I think it's even though it was a little bit fraught and some people were dubious about it, I think that I want to commend this work because I think it has a great outcome, which is more money for this little neighbourhood shopping strip.
Great, thank you, Councillor Booth. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, echoing Councillor Booth's statements just then. I really think the work that has gone into this from both the Coburg Traders and from our Economic Development Department, it really should be commended. So I'll be really brief and say that we really should highlight the amount of work that has gone into this. This hasn't just been whipped up overnight. There is a lot of hours of hard work, and it's a credit to both the traders and to our staff that this is before us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Kavanagh?
Just to say that special charge schemes, they really are vital in any shopping strip. If you go around Melbourne and you look at shopping strips that are really vibrant and things happening, I've done a bit of research in the past and they've always got a special charge scheme.
Thanks, Councillor Kavanagh. Is there any further discussion from councillors? No? I'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour? I declare that carried. We'll now move on to Amendment C161, 395 to 429 Albert Street in Brunswick. Decision Gateway 3, consideration of the panel report and adoption. And Councillor Ratnam is on her feet.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move a motion which is an alternative to the wording in the agenda. So this is a substantive motion. And I'll read it out. That Council 1 notes the findings and recommendations of the panel appointed to consider Amendment C161 documented in the panel report dated 9th of December 2016 and included at Attachment 1. 2. Abandons Amendment C161 to the Moreland Planning Scheme pursuant to Section 28 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 for the following grounds. A. The height presents an unacceptable level of visual bulk to street and surrounding area. Point 3. Writes to the Minister for Planning advising their decision to abandon Amendment C161 to the Moreland Planning Scheme. And point 4. Notifies the landowners and all submitters of Council's resolution above. And I've circulated those words to the Manager of Governance. If the seconder, I'm happy to speak to it.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. There's been much debate about this amendment, and I am one of the councillors around the table who's been part of this process since it began. Last year and in terms of the advocacy the years before. I wanted to provide some context. The decision is up there and it's essentially proposing that we abandon this amendment. It is not often that we abandon amendments, but I think this is of such grave significance that I am proposing this. The reasons are outlined in the actual wording of the motion, but I want to talk a little bit more broadly in terms of context. I'm not talking to the reasons, I'm talking to context, because these are the context in which we're making these types of decisions. So many of us sit around the Urban Planning Committee, scratching our heads, pulling our hair out when we are told on decision after decision, you can't really change a planning system application by application. We do try to get better outcomes for each application, but we're always told that as councillors, your greatest power in changing and shaping the city to create a city that we want for the future, that's breathable and sustainable and livable and movable, is through the strategic power that you have when you zone said sites of the municipality to have a preferred character, bulk, etc. This is a zoning decision. This is one of the most significant powers that we have as councillors to shape the future of our city. And I want to talk a little bit about the history of what we've seen with decisions that council has attempted to make to shape our city for the future, but have had very little success with the complexity of the planning system that requires both local government and state government to share the responsibility. So we essentially can't do anything without the state government's approval. Just some context and history. C123, the Coburg Activity Centre. Council said yes to 6-star ESD, 20% affordable housing, third-party appeal rights, mandatory height controls. The panel said no. The minister said no. Brunswick Structure Plan, we said yes to 6-star ESD, 20% affordable housing, third-party appeal rights, mandatory height controls. Panel said no. Minister said no. Moreland Apartment Design Standards, we asked for Moreland Council said yes to minimum apartment sizes, minimum light and ventilation, building separation, minimum distances, and minimum apartment sizes. Panel said no. Minister said no. And upheld those recommendations in his better apartment design standards. And here we have zoning, and we're going to have lots of these kind of applications, and we've had one in just a couple of months previously, where we have a panel report that we've asked for 6 stories, mandatory. We've asked for affordable housing provisions in the DDO. We've asked for the accessible path to be on the private land, so we get better public amenity, not on the public land, so we don't reduce the public open space in the public land. The panel said, no, you can have 8 stories, discretionary, not even mandatory. you're going to put your path on the public land. We don't want your path on the private land, and you can remove the affordable housing provisions in the DDO. It said it's about duplication, but what's the harm in trying to strengthen some of the provisions that we're putting forward to the Minister? That's just the context. The reason for the decisions are outlined in the motion, but I just wanted to talk about the context in which we're making strategic planning decisions for the city.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Bolton?
I won't speak just yet.
Okay. Is there any further discussion from councillors? Councillor Kavanagh.
I want to speak against the motion, and I foreshadow that if it's unsuccessful, I'll be moving the officer recommendation. Actually, it's interesting because many of my reasons echo Councillor Ratnam's points about shaping the city. I actually believe that this, if it was approved, would actually improve the city. I do believe that currently, unfortunately, because of movement in jobs, etc., out to the north, that if you go along that strip, you'll see many underutilised former industrial sites. And so therefore, I think that this would actually improve. I think a mixed use in that spot would be extremely favourable to the city. I personally think it's a positive thing. I can hear the concerns about 8 stories, but if the officer recommendation is not for 8 stories, and we've also had some other commitments tonight and earlier on from the proponents. So I'm actually in support of the application, and I believe it is city shaping, and I do believe the zoning is the place to do it, and I believe this is appropriate on this occasion to rezone this. And I've thought that all through the process, and as we come towards the conclusion of it now, I remain that way.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Carly-Hannon.
I also rise to speak against this and would support a foreshadowed motion, and really similarly views to Councillor Kavanagh, that I really think that in this pocket, for me, if there is options for there to remain industrial land in the areas around Brunswick, then I support it. I grew up around this area and there's a lot of really thriving areas. However, this one is particularly underutilised, and it's recognised by all the landowners there that there is a better use for this space. My view is that interface with the park at the moment is very poor, and that by a rejuvenation of this site and turning it into housing, it would actually be a much better use of that land, and it would provide great opportunities for pedestrian and cycling paths and better linkages within all of those surrounding streets. I also think that it's actually a really great area for development similar to corridors like along the Upfield line or along the tram routes. This pocket here is really close to the 508 and the 510. It's right next to the Melville Road tram, Sydney Road and the Upfield line, and great cycling routes as well. So to me, it looks like a great place for us to be developing, and I can see a lot of opportunities there for housing. I also think that our planning scheme has really great policies already around the interface for that parkland as well.
Thank you, Councillor Carly-Hannon. Are there any further speakers on this? Councillor Tapanos?
We've had 2 against the motion. I'm wondering if there's 1 in favour.
Yeah. Councillor Martin? Sorry, Riley, sorry.
Yeah, look, I'm just speaking in favour of the amendment that's been put, or the motion that's been put by Councillor Ratnam. For those reasons, there have been numerous residents that have contacted me in the last few weeks. And although that's not ideal, because this came up to council last month, I think it's indicative of some of the complexities that are happening around our city, and that sometimes things go under the radar. And in talking to some of the local residents, it was quite clear that some people think this is just a development, and it's actually not a development, it's actually a rezoning to allow development. And in any case, I support some of the comments made in the debate that we do want to develop this site, but it needs to be done in a way that's actually going to produce a livable city, and one that actually has good outcomes for all concerned, and not just giving extra height in developments that really are just literally money in the pockets of developers, and that's not what I'm really standing here for. I certainly didn't get elected for that reason. And the fact that the footpath has been shoved back onto our land is a real indication of what I think is wrong with this proposal. And the fact that I really would challenge those who are speaking against this proposal, as put by Councillor Ratnam, the one before us, why we should have those heights in this area. It's actually surrounded by parkland, and I don't think it's appropriate. We've actually got some agreement around the general heights in our city, and these seem to be at the higher end of that when they're actually in the middle of what I would regard as green space, even though this is an industrial site. So I think I support this motion as it stands, and think that we need to reconsider how we develop this site and how we engage with the residents and everyone else who were affected by it as well.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Abood?
Yep, I'm rising to support these amendments. I don't think it's a situation where we're saying that there will never be any development in this area. I mean, the C158 suggests that this land is transitioning, but I think this is kind of like a bull that's gone rogue in the ring. And so the ideals that we had for this site, which were a mid-rise development, it was about the interface from the park to the development. It was about, trying to include some public housing, which is what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, and I thought everybody was supportive of that. I think this has just been a little bit watered down, and we need to come back and have another look at it. And so I'm definitely supporting this particular amendment.
Thank you.
Happy to close.
Councillor Bolton?
I think my main reason for supporting Councillor Ratnam's proposed resolution is because of the interface between the development and the park, because this is a very large area of green space, and I just think the whole question of overshadowing of parkland, I just think the whole the amenity of having such massive buildings right on the edge of parks, I just think is problematic. I think for a similar reason I'm opposed to the massive developments which even double the size at Pentridge, overshadowing the Coburg Lakes Reserve, and I feel a need to be quite consistent about that, and especially as I'm very aware of the massive development pressures in Brunswick with the lack of open space. So I think to try and have a more reasonable height next to the park, I think is quite an important thing to achieve.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Tapanos?
Okay. I'm a bit puzzled by this one, actually. In my time on council, spanning now into my third term, and also holding previously chairing the Urban Planning Committee and the planning portfolio, I've never seen an abandonment at this late stage. So it's quite a drastic move because it's not something that is the start of the process. It is something that is very much at the final conclusions of the process. And this has been a long one, and I know it was mentioned earlier in the chamber that the formal process may only have been a year, but it certainly has been discussions that started beyond my time, more than 10 years, discussions that involved working under the old policy, a change of the policy, and now we got towards the end, we formulated what we wanted to see, and we made a decision during the Mills discussion that we wanted to see a change of these sites to accommodate more jobs, to accommodate some sort of development. So at this late stage, to abandon it, I actually don't think that is the most wise thing to do. I've heard some of the background by Councillor Ratnam, and it was all that we don't really trust the minister. They haven't listened to our point of view in previous discussions. And that is disappointing from the minister, but under the law they have the prerogative to change rezonings, to do something different, and they have the ability to just rezone something overnight at the strike of a pen. And they've done so in Moreland, and we all know those applications. And I fear that if we lose control of this process by abandoning this amendment right here, right now, we risk that exactly. We risk that it will just be done by a minister at the strike of a pen because they have the power to do it. And what you are not getting in that case is you're not getting all of the benefits that have already been discussed, that have been negotiated, benefits to public realm, benefits and investments in the precinct. But more importantly, we're not talking about 8 stories in the officer's report. We're talking about 4 on the streetscape and 6. We all agreed, and I believe Councillor Ratnam agreed to that when this was first proposed, the formal process was proposed, that was a suitable agreement. So that is what this officer's recommendation is. It's about 4 to 6. 6 with setbacks on one of the big sites or a couple of big sites, 4 on the streetscape. You have a panel report, and I do admit there is some risk the minister will change and agree with the panel. But you also have a commitment here tonight, and this is the game changer for me, a letter that's been circulated, a commitment from those landowners that they are happy with the officer's report. So we could go to the minister tonight and get 4 to 6. We can do that, councillors, and that would be in line with what this council had agreed at the beginning of the process. And there are significant setbacks, significant public investment, and that would be a great outcome. It would be probably not the best outcome that every resident wants to see, but it would be the best outcome that is achievable on the site. We can abandon this amendment and let the minister make whatever decision the minister wants to make, and that is very dangerous. So I think that we could end up looking back at this decision and saying what a mistake that was. It sounded great at the time, it sounded a strong position, but in reality, we removed ourselves from the process and allowed someone else at Spring Street to make a decision, because this ain't going to be ignored at this late stage by government.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Ratnam.
I'd like to respond to...
Sorry, can I just say a couple of words?
Councillor
I've read Councillor Ratnam's amendment today and also a few days ago. What I want to ask is this question. We have qualified planners in this organisation. We're not full-timers. We're all part-time employees of this organisation. We've got over 1,000 employees. We've got people employed in our planning department who are qualified, experienced. This is what they do day in, day out. We're disregarding all the recommendations, pretty much, that our officers are making, and we're basically wanting to scrap what they've done over the past, not this year, but this has been going on now for 10 years. We've had nearly 3 mayors that have had to listen to this, well, similar to this development and this site, over and over again. I've read your amendments, Councillor Ratnam, and I don't actually know what the agenda here is, but we are losing good developers. We are losing good people that want to come into this city and make this a vibrant economy, make it a municipality where people want to invest, make it a municipality that is attractive. But when we make decisions like this, if we are going to make it tonight, and it's not, and we do agree to this, this is going to send a very clear message to all those large organisations out there that want to come into Moreland to say, you're not welcome, because every time our officers present us with something, we're going to do an amendment after amendment after amendment to try and abandon what our officers are suggesting and all their hard work. This hasn't just happened in one day. Our officers have spent months of work on this. And it's disappointing. I do apologise. I've had something really urgent that I had to attend to. But I've already read all this. And I just think, Councillor Ratnam, that this is going to have massive repercussions. And for all those families that are involved in this, in C161, for all those families that are waiting a response tonight, for all those families that have spent thousands of their own personal money over the last 10 years, we're basically going to say, bad luck, see you later, go somewhere else. And then expect these people to walk away tomorrow and go, okay, well, what do we do now? can our losses and move away? Do we sell it to another potential developer? I reckon they've probably got Buckley's doing that. So that's just my 2 words for what it's worth.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Ratnam?
Yep, I'd just like to respond to a few of the points raised in the debate, and thanks everyone for your passion and thought on this. Just in response to the latest points made, I do care about families. I really care about the families that are going to currently inhabiting Brunswick and Moreland and are going to inhabit Brunswick and Moreland for generations to come. I really care about making decisions that are going to create a city that we are really proud of and that we have some control of with the community. That's what my concern is. And we have to think about generations to come. That is essentially what zonings do to cities. We have some significant risks here that have been highlighted by the other councillors. And this isn't a matter of Spring Street coming and suddenly rezoning it. This was applicant-led. This was proponent-led. This happens across cities. I remember distinctly the decision that came to our last council meeting last year when we were tossing up. We were thinking we were actually happy with 4 stories. There's a proposal for 4 to 6, and there are a number of us who said we're actually reluctant to support anything that has 6 in it, even at that point, even 6. But we were given reassurances that there's a process to play out, and at any point in the process, council can abandon the process. That is the power that it has. It can explore the options through this process, through the consultation, through the panel report. But if you do not like what it's shaping up to be, you have the right to abandon. This is why it's written into the planning and environment law. Councils have the right to abandon, to protect their cities and to care for their cities for generations to come. I acknowledge that there might have been some agreement that the applicants who do stand, as Councillor Riley, to benefit significantly and disproportionately to the rest of the city by this rezoning, might have signed today, but there is nothing holding them to not selling that land tomorrow, and that agreement becomes void. We saw that across the road with the old high school site. The last planning application that came to us, the Urban Planning Committee, we had all these promises, oh yeah, we're happy to move the pathway back to get an agreement for the decision, and in good faith we made that decision, and they went to VCAT literally within the next week to appeal that. With the East Brunswick Village, this council before me, I think Councillor Tapanos was on that council, made a good faith decision to rezone that land into quite a big residential complex, put some quite strict controls on it. What happened? They went to VCAT to appeal a rezoning that was applicant-led, that Spring Street hadn't asked us to do. So it's quite a different context here, and we have the capacity to shape the city for the future, and I take that decision very, very seriously. And just in conclusion, I know there's been discussion about, the recommendation is for 6 stories, but if you actually read the panel report, you'll see that the Department of Environmental Land Use, Water and Planning on the 12th of January 2016 provided us advice that they would not support that, stating that the proposed maximum mandatory height of 6 stories is likely not to be supported as there's no strategic basis for mandatory height limits. So they've said no to mandatory height limits on everything else we've put before them, and they've said they're not going to support it this time. So I asked councillors, what do you think is going to happen when the panel said 8 stories discretionary, not mandatory, discretionary?
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Now I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Ratnam's alternate recommendation? All those against? I declare that carried. We'll now move on to Organisation Development Council Action Plan 2000. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'll go back. We'll now move on to DED 74, Residential Areas Reformed Residential Zone and Proposed Amendment C171.
I'd like to move a set of recommendations that are different to the one in the report, and they are as follows. So this is to replace all the recommendations in the report. 1, that Council notes the progress towards achieving Notice of Motion 2117 outlined in this report. 2, that Council will be updated by a councillor briefing about this progress and discuss the further required by the Notice of Motion 2117. 3, that Council will receive a report by October 2017 outlining its proposed approach towards conducting the staged process to conduct a strategic review and planning scheme amendment to review residential areas of Moreland that should be rezoned to a more suitable zone, including subpoints, as requested as part of Notice of Motion 2117. And if I have a second, I'm happy to speak to it.
Councillor Riley.
So my alternative recommendation, councillors, and there's been some to and fro on emails, you might have seen some of the background discussion, but my concern is that the report, while addressing some parts of the Notice of Motion, which is quite a significant omnibus proposal around looking at some of the anomalies and errors and gaps that we have in some of the residential zoning that happened over the last couple of years, to start to address that through a strategic planning scheme amendment process. This report goes some way to achieving that, but I think there are a number of points that need further work, so I'm not satisfied that we stop work on the notice of motion because there's a number of things that have to be completed. So essentially what this is asking is noting the progress, that we're going to have a briefing where we can discuss it a bit more, because there were a number of councillors, the actual notice of motion came to the floor of council because a number of councillors were raising this, particularly in urban planning committee, where we're having applications where people said this is the wrong zone, it shouldn't be general residential, a bit neighbourhood, or it shouldn't be residential growth, it should be general residential. And we said let's have a look with this new council so we really comprehend what the zoning implications are for the neighbourhood residential zones, and to start a staged process, maybe including some community consultation. And I think we've got a way to go to achieving that. So this just outlines a bit of a process to get there.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Riley, are there any further comments from councillors? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Now we'll move on to Organisation Development, Council Action Plan 2016 to 2017, Performance Report for the fourth quarter, the 1st of April to the 30th of June. Is there a councillor who wishes to move this report? Councillor Martin and Councillor Carly-Hannon. Councillor Martin, do you wish to speak to it? No. Councillor Carly-Hannon, is there any further discussion from councillors? In that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Yes, yep, okay, we'll just have a 5-minute adjournment. All those in favour of a 5-minute adjournment? I declare that carried. Yeah.
Yeah, my general business item. Yeah, so it'll it's probably sitting right at the end. But if you want, we can move it forward. Yeah, so we can move it forward. Yeah, through via Busy. I think it was. Yeah. So I've been talking to a lot of the other councillors in the Metro Waste groups. So we've got a Metro Waste meeting tomorrow night to work out next steps as far as what Metro Waste can do. But my GB tonight is essentially important for us to make public all the information that we're aware of, put it on our website, and then send a letter to the Premier and to the Prime Minister asking for an inquiry. So that's what I'm going to be asking for.
I haven't, so other councils.
And that's really all we can do at this sort of infant stages, I think, is just make everything public. So try and be as transparent as possible. So
I think there's the history in there, in my view. But seriously, the number of locals who didn't understand the level of engagement is not good. Even things explained to them. That's why we're dealing with the development, not a rezoning. This is the first stage being allowed.
I love it.
So I think that's a really good it's not very good. If it was that good, why weren't the developers talking to them? The locals about it. I think he possibly had that culturally affects a lot of the thinking of it. You're probably right.
You're talking to the minister, and they're talking to the minister, unfortunately. Is it the same way? You're right. They're taking out the lobster. I've already had a discussion with the board. Excellent, because it's his own situation. Yeah, I always just make me more comfortable. So I look at it and see no, I better than if you're just no, better change. Yeah, the recommendation changing. Because through the panel hearing, the panel report was 8. Yeah, the panel report was 8 hours. So the panel didn't change its mind. No. So our report was say to the minister, we support so it seems right in the sense that the minister could always say, the minister could say, I think we go to the minister and say, when the grants, when the grants, and the minister says, yeah, when the grants, give it to Bruno. Now they'll go there, and if he agrees to hear it, we're in trouble. If he doesn't agree to hear it, we're in trouble. So I think you just need to get back to the applicants, say it's from the state, decision.
All gone. Back to work.
I'm pretty sure we could say that.
I was always uncomfortable. My submission to the panel
but you've got to really like children if you were children. Now that could just be there are setbacks. So if you have a setback, so I think any costs but the last one, because so which it is a fine, it's a problem. But I think the last one,
all the way down. It's going to, I gotta get a cup of tea, of course.
Because in a sense they all fall apart.
Directly adjacent to not just I'm not sure. The entrance of the park. I think, yes. That's all right.
I think it was the end of 2019.
Oh, you got a map, or do you want me to? Yeah, so as you can see, but I was going to say it's this one. As much as that one that could get significant heights, none of these will be able to achieve that. That one is a little bit bigger than I thought, but I was told under this only one of them will be able to get height. So I always thought it was this one.
These people here really talk to me.
They're not going to be able to achieve any height. So just look how narrow it is. Yeah, I don't know about that one. I was told one will be able to get this huge amount. I actually think that might be a different title. That is very much part of that zone there. But all of these ones, and that yours is the then you certainly looking at the streetscape, which is lower setbacks, because I have to also, when it's like the pension, also comply with all of the provisions in the character provisions, all of that stuff, right? Not at the same level as a residential zone, but they still need to ensure that there is significant setbacks to prevent overshadowing and all of that stuff. But all that detail will come in the
I mean, I think that's what yeah, well, I mean, I normally just pull them out, and sometimes it does, yeah, it does. You know, when I just do it out, but it's nothing fancy.
Less than 40, because I was close to the extension, but I realised it was
remind them of that. But I'm also
direct involved in having a property right next to
yeah.
Well, that's up to him, Ted. So he can hear your views as a resident.
What about out of interest?
I didn't want someone to.
Because I thought I'm saying
And that leaflets. Yeah, they get some council calls. Oh no, it's wonderful. Good on you. That's awesome. James talking about it in our citizens that are just growing. Corporate services team meeting, and he called it the YMCA. So there was quite a few jokes about great swimming and birds doing step ropes. Well, since it's done. You've been there? Good. They're all?
I'm still.
Probably wasn't finished because no one's there to finish it yet.
Well, yeah, and also it's 3 grand.
I do remember that. I'd left. Yeah. I'd have got to be that clean and.
kindergarten.
No, nothing.
Oh,
Don't talk to Anita about this chocolate because she's not. Great,
I just saw that message from Alan. Nice.
They just push me to go in and do it, and they're not trying to
I think it was yours actually. Mine was mine. Oh, it was mine. No, they put 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it was mine. You know the one that's yours. Everybody else's. He's never liked me. My turn. So I don't know, some safety equipment. Yeah.
Vita doesn't get there. You collect the truth and put it away in the storage. But even this thing, as soon as this
I need a bit of timing in this email.
it's going to be closed
However, I'll remain
Oh, I haven't asked, but I will. So the GB. I just thought. I just saw it, John. I just saw it.
A minute, less than a minute. Say that again? Oh, yes, I just saw that actually. Oh, she's there. It's so good. I love it. I love it.
All right, okay. I think he's going to catch you in.
Dad, we'll go through the norms and hopefully we'll get through them quickly and then we'll bring the GB forward at the GB time.
Yeah. Like do it first.
Yeah.
If you do it first, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Ready when you are.
Okay. All right. Welcome back, councillors. Now we're on to the notices of motion for tonight. So I ask that you start by stating the motion and then provide a brief background to the motion. So the first one that we have is alcohol and other drug uses and related behaviours in Sydney Road and the Brunswick Precinct. And so that's Councillor Mark Riley.
Thank you. I'm hoping most people have had a chance to digest and read this motion, which is to look at some of the impacts of alcohol and other drug use in the Sydney Road precinct, particularly in the Brunswick area between Victoria and Albert Streets. But we know that the issues have over the years been greater than that that area. But at the moment, that's where we're focusing on to start with.
Sorry to interrupt, Councillor Riley. Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Kavanagh.
Sorry, I should have asked for a second. I must get into the habit. So the motion's looking to look at what's happening around some of the venues in this area, their hours of operation and the effects of people coming out onto the streets late at night after having imbibed or taken other substances, and really the impacts that it's having on some of our residents in this area. This arose from a planning application a month or so ago, and during that process it was quite evident that there were quite some significant issues in this area around noise and behaviours as people come out at 11, 12, 1 and 3 o'clock over the night. So people's nights can be quite impacted over quite a period. So this motion is trying to address that and look at some of the impacts around the cumulative decisions that we're making and the assessments. So we want to get a handle on that using some of the data that's coming from Victoria Police, the EPA and through other agencies. want to draw that together along with what other measures that the venues themselves can implement, and there is a forum that we can do this through, and it currently is only meeting once a year where the venues get together with the police. And given the changeover in the staff and the professional development and the casual nature of the workforce, it should really, in my view, be meeting at least twice a year. So we're hoping to step that up through this process and address it. And I would invite everyone to be part of that, particularly if you're in the southern part of the municipality. And I'll leave the motion as it's read there. I haven't read it specifically, but my speech covered it in general.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Kavanagh. Is there any further discussion from councillors? No. Councillor Abood.
I just rise to commend this motion and commend Councillor Riley on his work with this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. In that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. The next notice of motion is flammable external wall cladding from Councillor Bolton.
Okay, that's me, so I'll read it out. There is an error in the printed agenda, so people will need to go by what's on the screen, which was circulated earlier. So, number one, Council notes the establishment of the Victorian Cladding Task Force, jointly chaired by former Victorian Premier and Architect Ted Ballieu and former Deputy Premier and Minister for Planning John Thwaites. 2, endorses the Chief Executive Officer in responding to the 28th of July 2017 letter from the Victorian Cladding Task Force confirming Council's interest in participating as a pilot council in developing an audit methodology through the cataloguing of buildings and seeking further information on resource implications associated with the proposed commitment of council officers in the pilot. 3, receives updates from the Director of Planning and Economic Development on the progress of the pilot with any unbudgeted costs or resourcing implications to be reported to the November Council meeting for consideration prior to any formalisation of... that should have been as it was written, to be reported to a future council meeting for consideration prior to any formalisation of council's commitment to a pilot. 4, receives a report in respect to council conducting its own audit in the event that the VBA, that is the Victorian Building Authority, doesn't plan to conduct an audit of apartment buildings in Moreland for the use of non-compliant cladding and other fire risks in a timely manner, that this report come back to council in November. 5, writes the Honourable Craig Laundy MP, Assistant Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science in the Federal Government and Chair of the Building Ministers Forum, to take action against all unsafe and non-compliant building products and to advocate to the Building Codes Committee and Australian Building Codes Board changes to the National Construction Code that A, multi-storey buildings below 25 metres have fire sprinklers installed as a mandatory requirement. B, that other fire safety measures such as high-rise buildings being required to provide 2 sets of fire escape stairs and fire refuge rooms for occupants of higher stories who could have trouble escaping downstairs. C, that the National Construction Code to include all external wall cladding system products used on buildings to comply with Australian Standards 5113, fire propagation of external walls and mandatory compliance levels and testing of cladding systems. And 6, writes to the Minister for Planning, that is the State Minister, to advocate to the State Government to A, review the Building Act 1993 to increase the number of mandatory building inspections, including the installation of cladding. B, re-regulate the building approval and inspection system by reversing the privatised nature of the system of private building surveyors to overcome issues such as potential conflicts of interest where building surveyors are contracted by builders and developers who sometimes shop around for the most compliant building surveyor. And C, consider an audit of unlicensed workers carrying out work such as sprinkler fitting works that they are not licensed to do. If I have a second, I can explain the motion.
Is there a seconder? No. For want of a seconder, that will lapse.
That's rather alarming.
So we'll now move on to the review of pest and weed.
we have a procedural motion to lay that on the table when it's been first moved?
Needs to have a second first.
Needs to have a seconder? Okay, I'm happy to second it for that purpose. I'm happy to second it.
Okay. Even though, I'll just clarify
Yes,
this. So we've gone through it. It's for want of a seconder at that point it lapsed.
Declared.
So we then
It was
return.
declared lapse.
It was declared lapse.
All right, no problem. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on to the review of pest and weed management. Unbelievable.
Okay. The council receives a report on the pest and weed management policy, including the following information. A, to what extent has herbicide and pesticide use been reduced? B, to what extent have alternatives to herbicides been used, such as steam weeding? C, how many complaints have been received over the last 12 months about the use of pesticides in public spaces and what has been the nature of the complaints? D, statistics on the number of times that the buffer zone around children's playgrounds hasn't been observed. E, how the no spray register is enforced and how it has been publicised. F, what supervision audits are done of private contractors to ensure that they are not spraying when it is windy, are not spraying into gardens, are not spraying children's playgrounds and are wearing safety equipment. G, the percentage of workers who spray herbicides in public who are contractors compared to the percentage of workers who are employed directly by council, and which category of workers is responsible for which area. And H, process of spraying public open space such as parks, reserves, sports field, ovals and where kids play.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Is there a seconder?
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes.
So one question is to the officers, just to find out if there's, I know this is policy that's probably almost a year. Like, I'm wondering if when this policy was adopted, there was something in it to tell us that there would be a report coming back a year later, which I think is about September.
Through the Mayor, I'd have to refresh my memory of the actual resolution, but I do know it was adopted in September 2016. But I have to refresh my memory whether it had a report back.
So are you telling me that you don't know if there is a report coming back? Like, basically, if there would have been a report coming back anyway, then I wouldn't see that there is a reason to second this nom now. But if it's not coming back, then I would be keen to second the nom.
Through the Mayor, if I could have a minute, I'll be able to find the resolution and be able to provide a firm answer to whether a report back was part of that September resolution.
Laid on the table.
Sorry, laid on the table.
Procedural motion to lay it on the table.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's lay this on the table and we can return to it at
I'll move a procedural motion to lay this on the table.
Yep.
Oh,
So
Just
I
gotta
don't think
vote?
we need to vote on it, but it's
Okay,
laid
no,
on the
you need to
table.
vote.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, you just
Okay.
don't have a second.
Okay. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Bolton, you're abstaining from voting.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I know this has been unusual, but if I could seek the leave of council, just ask a question in relation to a matter that, the previous matter, which is a notice of motion, Councillor Bolton's motion. The procedures don't allow us to talk about why we might not want to second the motion, so it doesn't actually allow the debate. So I just think it's important to clarify. So if I can have leave of council, I might just ask the Mayor or CEO if they want to respond. There's a lot of background work to that issue of cladding, which councillors have been briefed on as well. And my understanding is that we're already pursuing that work, hence why there might not have been a seconder, because there might have been different reasons. We can't speak to that, we can't debate it because it wasn't seconded, but I thought it might be good for public information that we state what work is occurring.
I'll hand over to the CEO.
Well, if
Through
that
the
happens,
Mayor.
I'd like to actually explain why I moved some of
No,
the things
sorry.
I moved.
Councillor Bolton, this is
I think
just...
there's some important safety things I moved.
But you don't have a
as part of my
seconder, so
motion.
you can't speak to it. So this is a way of...
I think just by way of reassurance, just to let you know, we've been scoping whether what the resource requirements are, because we're hoping to be part of the pilot. So I just wanted to give you that by way of reassurance, given the discussion tonight. That was it.
Okay. All right. So now, with the review of pest and weed management, that's been laid on. That's been laid on the table. Okay. We'll now turn to the Council's response to the changes to funding of the motor access officer position by the state government. And Councillor Ratnam.
I'd like to move the two resolutions in the report, and one is to note that we're funding a 0.5 EFT position from the base budget. It's a new funding of a position to support the implementation of Council's Disability Action Plan. And in point 2, to receive a report by February 2018 that looks at a strategic action framework and plan to address the gaps that will result from the loss of Metro Access funding. That will include consultation with internal and external stakeholders and a discussion with councillors about the level and type of functions council should provide towards improving mobility access, both at council and across the city. And if I have a seconder, I'm happy to speak to it.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. So as described in the report, we've just been made aware of some changes. There's really significant changes happening to local government and the broader disability service provider sector with the introduction of the National Disability Insurance Scheme. And some of those implications are being borne out now. So for example, we've been funded by the state government to provide Metro Access officers. We work very closely with them, for example, on our Disability Advisory Committee that I've sat on for a number of years. We've recently been made aware that with the NDIS and the changes therefore to the state funding, they are going to ask us to report. We've got one more year of that funding. After that, we don't know what's going to happen, but my understanding is that we don't have that funding anymore. Up until this point, council has been funded to do its disability access work through Metro Access. That's how council has chosen to fund it. We've got one more year. However, the recent change was that those Metro Access officers aren't able to work on anything non-NDIS related. And the Metro Access officers in the years gone by have actually worked on lots of non-NDIS related work, including things like providing advice to other sections of the council to improve mobility access, whether it's urban development, infrastructure, social development, etc. So essentially what this report is doing is confirming that we've got a stopgap measure. So we've got some extra funding to carry us through this year so that the Metro Access officers can both do NDIS work and non-NDIS work. But it also asks for a broader process where us as councillors actually look at what the gaps are, what the issues are, and how we need to fund it. Because over the last few years, a number of us have been considering whether we've actually had enough support, and I think there is more work to be done. We talk about this at Urban Planning Committee about how we improve mobility access and build homes that people can, that are accessible in the future. So I actually think that we might have to have a whole-scale discussion about the type of disability access work that council does, and this motion sets it up.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Riley, do you wish to add anything to that? Is there any further discussion from councillors? No, in that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. We'll now move on to the next notice of motion, reducing the harm caused by electronic gaming machines in Moreland. Councillor Ratnam.
Yes, I'd like to move the resolutions as noted in the report. I won't read them all out because there's a number of them, but I'm happy to speak to them if I have a seconder.
Councillor Kavanagh to second.
So councillors, fellow council across the creek at Darebin recently passed a similar motion. They too have been very strong advocates about reducing the harm that pokies, the electronic gaming machines, cause throughout our city. It was pleasing to read that Moreland's loss has come down somewhat. We're still tracking at over $60 million lost in our community on the pokies each year. We have a long way to get that down even further. So while we're tracking downwards, we've got a lot more work to do. This motion essentially seeks to strengthen our resolve and our action in terms of ensuring that organisations, sporting groups, anyone who receives a grant won't be eligible for council funding if they are operating pokey machines. This is going to help push more of our community towards reducing EGM use. So it looks at reviewing our lease policies are pretty strong anyway. It looks to share some of those learnings with other councils should they wish to do, because we've had quite a successful policy, and confirm that no sporting clubs in our community actually run EGMs. So I hope that we have the support of council on this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Kavanagh.
Just to congratulate Councillor Ratnam on the motion. I know that a number we've had been very strong on our sporting clubs not having poker machines and things, but this goes a little bit further than that in some of the points in the motion. So I'm very pleased to see that. And it is pleasing to see that the number has gone down for poker machine losses. And I could easily say a number like 61 million, but when you think about it, that's $168,000 every day in Moreland. $168,000 every single day in Moreland.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Is there any further discussion on this? No. In that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried, and I'd ask that that be recorded as unanimous as well. Okay. The next notice of motion is online permit system, and Councillor Rathman.
Councillors, I'd like to propose a slightly altered motion to one that's in your agenda. It's quite small change, but instead of saying investigates developing, that it says expands and further develops our online system for residents to apply, and the rest of the statement stays the same. So essentially we'd say expands and further develops our online system for residents to apply for and obtain permits required under the general local law in order to improve the speed at which permits can be issued, and point 2, receives a report by the time the general local law is presented for endorsement, outlining the options and costs for this expansion.
Thank you. Councillor Abood to second.
So this is just some follow-up work from the discussions we've been having about the general local law, as well as reducing the fees and scrutinising the fees a lot more. We've made some changes within this budget already to bring down those fees after that discussion about the general local law. This is trying to improve the speed at which permits can be issued, so that when permits are required, we can actually do them quite quickly. And I'm hopeful that our online system, we've got a couple of permits that you can get online at the moment, and the speeds are relatively quick, but we're trying to ensure that whole system moves online so that the community can be reassured then that when they do have to apply for a permit, even if it's free, that it can be done very, very quickly. It has some basic provisions and guidelines, and we can have the whole system rolling, because the general local law is actually a system. It's just not one sort of statutory sort of law and description. It's the permits, it's the conditions, it's the procedures, and what we're attempting to do is to make sure that's clear and transparent, robust, and that we review that, and that all comes as a package when we adopt the final local law.
Thank you, Councillor Rathman. Councillor Abood?
Yes, I'm supporting this motion because I think it's a great idea for council to make obtaining a permit easier. I think it's really important to stress that a card table to collect signatures about a precious tree in the city needs a permit because of council's liability if something goes horribly wrong, or if someone can't get where they need to be past that table. I don't think that the local law requesting a permit for a card table, and I'm pretty sure all of us have propped up a card table and handed out flyers or collected signatures at some point. It's not that we don't want that to happen. We do want that to happen. It's a part of, what's good about the city. It's just that we have an obligation to protect the residents who live here and make sure that everyone gets what they need from us, and that includes, stuff like being able to read in your application, in your permit, that you should have the table placed in a certain position to make sure that people can get through, and then we're covered legally if something goes wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Is there any further discussion from Councillor Martin?
Just really briefly, I think this is a fantastic notice of motion. I think moving everything online, digitalisation, we cut down our paper consumption. We also cut down the costs to council as well. It does cost a lot of money to send everything out in the mail. So if we're able to do it electronically, it's a win for ratepayers in both speed and cost. So I fully commend this notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Is there any further discussion from councillors? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. The next notice of motion is the waive synthetic pitch hire fees for the Faulkner Soccer Club, all-female community cup. And that was Councillor Carly Hammond.
Yep, so the title really tells you already what it wants to do.
Did you wish to add anything else to it?
I will if I've got a second.
I'll second. Yep, Councillor Abood.
Yep. So I'll just really briefly, basically the Faulkner Soccer Club came to council letting us know about this all-female community cup that they're planning to run at the end of the soccer season, and council officers